Who won the fifth Republican primary debate last night, hosted by CNN? In my mind, it was actually a close one. So, naturally, I have Donald Trump winning because he's Donald Trump. So, of course, he's won every single debate so far, not only according to the Snap polls, but even according to the scientific polls. He doesn't win by as much in the scientific polls, but he still wins in the scientific polls. So it's almost like every single debate, he has a giant head start to begin with. It's like everybody's running a 100-yard dash and they just start him 80 yards deep. And then like, okay, go. And then naturally he's going to cross the finish line first. So he doesn't need to do much. He just needs to keep being Trump in order to keep winning the debates, and that's exactly what's happening. And naturally, that's a terrifying thought. But yet again, I have him winning despite the outrageous and grotesque things that he said. He, for example, doubled down on his idea to kill civilians in the Middle East on purpose. Stay classy. I do believe you agree with terrorists on that one, and I do believe it's okay to call you a terrorist now, because this is multiple times that you've said, no, I will actively choose to kill the civilians on purpose. Okay, well, that's what terrorists do. So, on the substance, obviously, nobody won last night. Well, on the substance, you could say Rand Paul won. But in terms of the overall sentiment and the overall feeling I got from the debate, if I'm trying to judge it through the eyes of your average Republican, I would say Donald Trump won. But then I have close behind him, I go Marco Rubio, who played his role, Mr. Establishment fallback candidate, so that if/when Donald Trump falls off, Marco Rubio is right there to say, I'm the safe one, go with me. Then I actually have, believe it or not, Chris Christie. Now, Chris Christie, yet again, said multiple absurd things, including, hey, let's do World War III with Russia. Among other things, at previous debates, he says stuff like, cut Social Security, raise the retirement age, forget Medicare, things that the American people don't like. But when it comes to your average Republican, it's not like they're really well-versed in policy substance and nuance. They're more about feelings and emotions and strength and confidence. So I go Trump, Rubio as the establishment fallback who just held his own yesterday, which is all he needs to do. Then Christie. Then I actually have Rand Paul, because Rand Paul, it was nothing but substance. I mean, he was almost right on everything yesterday, which makes sense because this is a foreign policy debate. And on foreign policy, that's an issue where Rand Paul is, he's a libertarian-ish overall, I should say, but that means on foreign policy, on some social issues, he's pretty liberal. So he made sense. Now, the audience wasn't really digging him all that much, but actually, I'll get to the Snap polls in a second. He didn't do bad when it comes to, what everybody's saying directly after the debate. So the room, I guess, in this case, was not very indicative of what a lot of other people thought. So then I have him. After Paul, I go Cruz, who, again, held his own, even though I can't stand him. He seems so smarmy and fake to me. Then I go Fiorina, who's playing the tough guy, or I guess tough woman role, who, again, on substance, it petrifying. I wouldn't want her anywhere near any position of power, but I think she in some ways rubbed the Republican base the right way. Then I have Jeb, who actually had his best debate yet, but he's Jeb Bush, so, that's not saying much. It's like being the tallest kid in kindergarten. His best debate performance is like Trump on his worst day. Then I go John Kasich, who has continued to be unimpressive since the first debate where he had a home crowd and he looked like he was doing a good job and he looked like a somewhat relevant candidate. Now he appears to be almost wholly irrelevant. And then dead last, I have Carson, who had his moment in the sun, had his 15 minutes of fame, and now he's just dwindling away into nothingness, largely because he doesn't know dick about dick. Not that that ever stops the Republicans from supporting other people who don't know dick. All right, so that's my general takeaway. Now let's get into the Snap polls. So Time has theirs up, and according to them, Trump, 49%, a crushing victory. Now again, caveats on this because we're talking about Snap polls. They're unscientific, admittedly so, although they have been, indicative to some extent of what the scientific polls will be like, because in previous debates, the scientific polls kind of backed up what the Snap poll said. But Trump, 49%. Then you have Paul at 15%. Paul coming in number 2. So, that's good. It's good for people who actually give a shit about policy. Then we have Rubio at 11%. We have Cruz at 8%. We have Bush at 7%, Christie at 3%, Fiorina at 2%, Kasich at 2%, and Carson at 2%. Then we shoot on over to Drudge to see what order they have it in. Trump, number 1 by a mile and a half again, with about 44%. You have Cruz coming in second with 27%. You have Paul coming in third with 13%. Then Rubio at 8%, Christie at 3%, Fiorina at 2%, Bush at about 2%, Carson at about 2%, and Kasich dead last with about 1%. Then finally, we move over to Slate here. Slate has Trump at 51%, just absolutely positively crushing everybody in sight. You have Rand Paul number 2 again, so the wider audience, at least in the snap polls, kind of digging Rand Paul making sense on foreign policy. Marco Rubio at 8%, Cruz at 7%, Bush at 4%, Christie at 3%, Fiorina at 1%, Kasich at 1%, Carson at 1%, and then they threw in Hillary and CNN to the mix as well here. Hillary is at 7%, and CNN is at 2%. So there's your overall debate breakdown. My general takeaway is as follows. It's Trump's race to lose. That's a gross thing to think about, and it's fucking horrifying, but he's leading by so much, not only after the debates and, those specific instances, but also in the national polls and also in a lot of states as well. He's leading by so much that all of the wishful thinking of everybody in the world who doesn't want him to be leading, it doesn't amount to dick. So, call it for what it is, but Trump is leading. If he indeed doesn't get the nomination, to me, it appears like at this point you have Marco Rubio and actually Ted Cruz, who are the most likely behind him. And Rubio would be the establishment fallback candidate, the guy who's akin to a Mitt Romney or a John McCain like the last time around. And Ted Cruz is kind of a mix of the super anti-establishment Donald Trump, and not really anti-establishment, but he shows himself like that. Cruz would be a mix of anti-establishment Trump and establishment Rubio. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here on out, but there's your overall breakdown.